5 years ago, my wife had this wild idea. She was enamored with the notion of renting out a charming cabin in the woods. Camping was a hard no for her. The mere thought of a flimsy sheet separating us from the elements didn't quite cut it. But a cabin, a sturdy wooden structure, that was something she could handle. After relentless weeks of extolling the virtues of this idyllic getaway, I caved. I reluctantly agreed to embark on what was promised to be an incredible camping adventure in a rustic log cabin. The planning took a few weeks, but we spared no expense, throwing everything into our car and embarking on a 6-hour drive to a remote location. The last leg of the journey involved a 4-hour drive and a 2-hour trek through the wilderness in our car to reach this supposedly amazing cabin. The reality, however, fell woefully short of our expectations. The picturesque spot we had envisioned had decayed over the years, left unmaintained and disappointing. Despite our initial dismay, exhaustion from the journey prevailed, and we decided to tough it out and retire for the night. Our discontent only intensified when we discovered that the bed sheets appeared to have been neglected for weeks. We were too tired to make a fuss, so we removed the sheets, opting to sleep directly on the mattress. The discomfort wasn't just physical, though. Strange noises echoed throughout the night, as if animals were frolicking directly above us. The cabin's design left a space in the roof area, but it seemed disconnected from any part of our cabin. Armed with a flashlight, I braved the unsettling task of inspecting the roof for a possible source, all the while dreading the prospect of encountering a wild animal in the dark. To my dismay, my search yielded nothing, and we resigned ourselves to trying to sleep through the mysterious sounds. Morning arrived, and we decided to salvage the trip with an invigorating hike my wife had promised would be worth the trouble. Setting out for a 7-hour trek through nature, we returned exhausted, looking forward to a relaxing evening. Little did we know, our moods were about to take a drastic turn. As we entered the cabin, laughter and banter filled the air, until we noticed that our meticulously organized food, neatly tucked away in the kitchen corner, had been tampered with. The cabin door, which we had dutifully locked, remained secured with a key, as the owner had instructed. Yet, someone had infiltrated our sanctuary, consuming our provisions with methodical precision. Panic set in as we realized we were not alone. The eerie feeling of being watched crept over us. In hushed tones, my wife and I speculated about the intruder's motives. The realization dawned that there might be a person living in the midst of nowhere, hiding in our cabin. The theft of our food was troubling, but matters escalated when I discovered my wallet missing. Anger surged through me. Not only had this intruder taken our sustenance, but now my personal belongings as well. Fueled by a mix of anger and apprehension, we decided to confront this mysterious interloper. Searching the cabin's exterior, we discovered a small hatch propped open with a stick. It was our gateway to uncovering the truth. With a flashlight in hand, I mustered the courage to open the hatch, revealing a small, rat-like man cowering in the dark corner. The light exposed him, and, to my surprise, he meekly tossed my wallet back. It felt grimy and repulsive, but I retrieved it nonetheless. With our belongings hastily packed into the car, we sped away, leaving the unsettling encounter behind. When we finally regained cell service, we informed the owner of the cabin about our uninvited guest. He expressed sincere apologies and pledged to send the police to handle the situation. We didn't seek a refund or any compensation, we simply wanted to erase the disturbing memory of a stranger living above our heads in the dead of night. The lingering question haunted me: how did he manage to get in when we had diligently locked the door? The haunting experience at the Myrtles plantation remains etched in my memory, starting from the moment we arrived around 2 p.m. The air was thick with anticipation as we embarked on a complimentary tour of the grounds. The vibes were undeniable, unlike anything I had ever felt before. As someone who rarely gets caught up in the supernatural, the intensity of the atmosphere struck me profoundly. Our guide led us through the plantation's historic spaces, weaving tales of the past that sent shivers down my spine. The plantation's history was infamous, and it seemed like every corner held a story, every shadow concealed a secret. By the time we reached the room where we would be spending the night, the energy was already charged, each step carrying a weight of history and mystery. Taking a moment to evaluate our accommodation, I noticed an unusual aura near the back door. The vibes in that specific spot were so overwhelming that I became convinced something significant had occurred there. The mysteries of the Myrtles plantation beckoned, and I knew I had to unravel them. As the clock approached 5 p.m., our hunger took precedence, prompting us to venture into the nearby town for a meal. Returning around 6:30, we were approached by a friendly woman we had encountered earlier. Aware of our paranormal enthusiasm, she invited us to her room in the main plantation. Intrigued, we accepted, and as we explored, the vibes were relatively normal until I entered the bathroom. The atmosphere inside the bathroom was oppressive, a terrible energy that sent chills down my spine. It wasn't a place where something kind had happened, that much was certain. The air hung heavy with an unspoken darkness, and I couldn't wait to leave the confined space. Although I couldn't pinpoint the origin of the negativity, I couldn't shake off the feeling that something unseen lurked within those walls. We didn't linger in her room for too long, returning to our cabin, where the vibes persisted. My younger sister and I, both feeling somewhat spooked, decided to share a bed for the night. To distract ourselves from the eerie ambience, we played the game Farkle until midnight. Putting the game away, we prepared to get some much-needed sleep. As the room fell silent, a new sound emerged, the methodical creaking of the rocking chair on the front porch. It rocked persistently, and with no wind to blame, the unnerving noise perplexed me. Choosing not to share this observation with my younger sister, I buried my unease and settled down for the night. Sleep proved elusive, my mind racing with thoughts and worries until at least 3:30 a.m. The next morning, we gathered in the main house for breakfast, where other campers shared equally terrifying tales of their encounters. Stories ranged from the feeling of a spectral presence sitting on their beds to someone emerging from a seemingly empty cabin to shush noisy campers. Each narrative added another layer of eeriness to our experience. Returning to our cabin after breakfast, we sat there for a while, playing games on our tablet and trying to relax. However, the tranquility was shattered when a heated argument erupted between my sister and my mom. It was as if the spirits within the cabin took offense, retaliating with a supernatural display. The bathroom faucet turned on full force and then abruptly off again. The three of us freaked out, clearing out of the cabin in less than 30 seconds. The paranormal encounter served as a chilling reminder of the haunted history that permeated the Myrtles plantation. I couldn't shake off the unnerving feeling of being alone in that cabin, situated in the middle of nowhere, and realizing that I was never truly alone. The echoes of that night at the Myrtles continue to linger, a testament to the enduring power of the supernatural. When I was 15 years old, my friend and I found ourselves facing homelessness, the result of a series of poor life choices that had led us down a challenging path. Desperate and with nowhere to turn, my friend mentioned a cabin that his family had frequented not too far from where we were. According to him, the cabin had recently gone out of business, and he thought it might be a place for us to seek refuge. It was a stroke of luck that one of us had come across this information in the local paper. We decided to take a chance and made our way to the cabin after a day of uncertainty. Although a bit out of the way and somewhat remote, the location seemed decent enough for us to establish a temporary domicile, allowing us to apply for jobs and get back on our feet. We began the process of applying for jobs in the nearby town, and one day, my friend set out to drop off some resumes. However, as the hours turned into days and then into a week, he never returned. Anxiety crept in, and I became increasingly worried about his well-being. Eventually, I mustered the courage to visit his parents' house, hoping for some answers. To my surprise, his parents welcomed me with open arms and pleaded with me to help find their son. I explained that I had no idea where he might be but assured them that I would do my best to locate him. They seemed relieved that someone was willing to help, and I left their house determined to unravel the mystery of my friend's disappearance. Days passed, and I was on the edge of despair when, out of nowhere, my friend returned. His sudden reappearance left me both relieved and confused. When I asked him about his disappearance, he shared a bizarre and unsettling tale. He recounted standing in the cabin, listening to his iPod, when suddenly the music started distorting. In the blink of an eye, he found himself outside the cabin, disoriented and surrounded by the unfamiliar forest. He ran through the woods in a panic, trying to make sense of his surroundings. Eventually, he reluctantly returned to the cabin, only to discover that more time had passed than he could account for. What felt like a few hours to him had turned into days. The experience left him shaken and bewildered, and we decided then and there never to return to those cabins. As time passed, the cabins were eventually knocked down, fading away like a strange chapter in our lives. The mystery of that inexplicable event lingered, an eerie tale that became a part of our shared history, one that we would never forget. "27 years of rural Colorado living had seasoned me well for the solitude and unpredictability of the wild. Yet, even with a lifetime of experiences, one haunting incident from 3 years ago still lingers in my memory, casting a shadow over the otherwise serene landscape. It was November, and the crisp mountain air signaled the arrival of elk hunting season. I embarked on this particular expedition with a couple of co-workers, ready for the challenges the rugged terrain would present. Our initial plan was to set up camp in the high-elevation hunting area, but Mother Nature had different plans. A thick blanket of snow thwarted our progress, forcing us to improvise and settle for a pull-off near the mouth of a meadow, a mere 100 yards from early 1900s herder cabins. The first night passed uneventfully, but as dawn broke, we set out into the frost-laden wilderness, determined to make the most of our hunting excursion. Little did we know that the tranquility of the mountains would soon be shattered by an inexplicable and spine-chilling experience. On the second night, our peaceful sleep was abruptly interrupted by a sound that still echoes in my nightmares, a blood-curdling, tortured scream emanating from the direction of those ancient cabins. The night air carried the anguished wails for what felt like an eternity, only to be silenced abruptly by a deafening bang, followed by the unmistakable sound of shattering glass. Startled and alarmed, we emerged from our tents, flashlights in hand, scanning the darkness for any sign of the source of that otherworldly noise. The cabins loomed in the distance, but the beams of our lights failed to reveal any discernible figure or movement. Fear crept in, a collective uncertainty that kept us rooted to the spot, unable to muster the courage to venture into the unknown forest at such an unholy hour. As we strained our eyes against the inky blackness, we discovered an unsettling detail: no tracks marred the pristine snow around the cabins, not even those of animals. It was as if the very earth had refused to bear witness to the eerie events of that night. Our curiosity overwhelmed our apprehension, prompting us to investigate the cabins at first light. Approaching cautiously, we found the closest cabin marred by a bizarre scene. The broken window, shattered from the inside, defied all logic. The shards of glass lay scattered on top of the snow, untouched by any footprints. Peering inside, I could only discern a solitary table, situated on the side opposite the door. The entrance remained securely boarded up, adding to the perplexity of the situation. Haunted by the events of that unsettling night, we decided to abandon our makeshift campsite and relocate to a new area, hoping to leave the mysterious disturbance behind. However, the subsequent nights proved to be equally restless, each passing moment haunted by the echoes of that dreadful scream. After enduring 2 more sleepless nights, I made the reluctant decision to call off the hunt and return home empty-handed. The mountains, once a sanctuary for my outdoor pursuits, now held an air of unease. None of us dared to revisit that particular hunting area, forever marked by the inexplicable and the unsettling. The wild had spoken in a language we couldn't comprehend, leaving us with a lingering sense of disquiet that eclipsed the beauty of the Colorado wilderness. The year was 2006, and the summer air hung heavy over Cincinnati, Ohio, specifically in Clermont County. I was a 17-year-old girl eagerly approaching my 18th birthday, accompanied by my boyfriend Michael and our friends Alyssa and Nick. Little did we know, this particular adventure to an abandoned cabin in the heart of the woods would etch an indelible mark on our memories. The eerie tale began with the discovery of an isolated cabin, accessible only by a 1-mile trek through dense woods. The path, shrouded in mystery, led us to a peculiar sight: abandoned vehicles riddled with gunshot marks, including cars, an ambulance, tractors, and even a short school bus. How these vehicles got there, marooned amid the trees, remained a baffling enigma. Prior to this fateful encounter, my boyfriend and I, along with 2 other friends, Tom and Janet, had ventured into the cabin's depths. Armed with a Ouija board, we engaged in the typical teenage curiosity, asking mundane questions. The planchette spelled out "Hui," sending a shiver down our spines. Hastily bidding farewell, we explored the cabin's upper reaches, discovering an inexplicable find: a massive child's sock hidden in the wall. Our intrusion seemed to awaken an ancient alarm clock, its ticking haunting us until I shattered it into pieces. Our journey downstairs revealed a peculiar well, shrouded and mysterious. And then, the alarm clock's ticking resurfaced, defying the logic of its destruction. Undeterred, we explored an outdoor cellar, where we stumbled upon a child's boot containing a bone. That macabre discovery marked the end of our first visit. As the days passed, I couldn't resist sharing the mystique of the cabin with Alyssa and Nick. Excitement tinged with trepidation filled the air as we planned our return. The day arrived, with the 4 of us embarking on a seemingly ordinary outing to the lake, packing a cooler with essentials. After a blissful 5 hours by the lake, we dropped off the cooler at Nick's house and headed to my boyfriend's parents' place, parking our car where the trunk held no hint of the bizarre events that would unfold. Equipped with flashlights, we retraced the path to the cabin through 2 massive drainage tunnels. The air felt different this time, a subtle shift in the atmosphere that eluded explanation. Upon reaching the cabin, the creeping sense of unease intensified. Alyssa and I ascended the stairs, eager to revisit the oddities we had uncovered before. Suddenly, a deafening crash echoed through the cabin. Something had been thrown or knocked over, jolting Alyssa into a state of panic. Her terrified sprint back to the creek signaled something far more sinister than we could fathom. With trepidation, we joined the guys outside, only to find an empty expanse. Alyssa, still visibly distressed, stammered about seeing someone peering through the window. Confusion set in, there was no one in sight. The decision to leave became unanimous. As we retraced our steps by the creek, we encountered a surreal sight: enormous rocks, standing like sentinels in a straight line. They hadn't been there on our way in, raising the hair on the back of our necks. Panic set in as we quickened our pace, rushing towards the first drainage tunnel. That's when the inexplicable intensified. Our once functional flashlights refused to illuminate the darkness. What had worked perfectly on our journey and now failed us. The oppressive weight of the unknown bore down on us as we stumbled through the tunnels and emerged back at my boyfriend's parents' house. As Alyssa sought refuge in their car, her screams and frantic movements caught our attention. She was covered in ants, and the source of the infestation was a massive, rusted wool sock in the trunk. A sock that had materialized out of thin air, defying all logic. In the aftermath, we uncovered unsettling details about the cabin's former inhabitant, Hubert, or Huey. Journals found by my boyfriend on a previous visit hinted at a dark past, one that involved danger to children. The events of that day left an indelible mark, a chilling reminder that some mysteries are better left unsolved. To this day, I remain haunted by the inexplicable events in that forsaken cabin. The boulders standing sentry, malfunctioning flashlights, and the sudden appearance of an ant-covered sock defy rational explanation. The forest harbors secrets, and that abandoned cabin holds a darkness that time has not erased. If you ever stumble upon such an enigmatic place in the woods, heed my warning, leave it be. Some mysteries are better left undisturbed, for you never know what may linger in the shadows, waiting to be awakened.